welcome back to yet another episode of Inside Dfinity. Today we have a bit of a special setup. Next to me is not any of Dfinity's team members, but Elena, my girlfriend. She does not work in crypto, but I think we left a bit of an impact, or we had a bit of an impact on her. She's been working out of the Dfinity office on her own stuff, but she's definitely had a bit of a crypto influence over the past 2 weeks. Elena usually works in SEO, search engine optimization, so she helps companies appear further up on the Google results list. But this week she cleared her calendar to educate herself on crypto. And I wanted her to come on to the show and talk a bit about her experience and how she progressed and what she looked at, what she's learned in that time. Because I think it's a common question that I get. How can I get started in crypto? How do I find out what all these cryptic terms mean? How can I figure out what to make of all these 1,500 different currencies that are currently listed on pages like CoinMarketCap? And so maybe we'll start with that. Like, first of all, when did you first hear about crypto and blockchain?
So I first heard about Bitcoin actually a while ago in 2012. I used some Bitcoins for a transaction, but didn't have any clue about the whole system, what it's capable of, this whole new world of blockchain. I didn't know anything about it and forgot about it later after that transaction. I then started to get more into that through Cedric, actually, when he started to talk about conferences, about Dfinity, and I already felt that, yeah, it's a big thing, but still didn't have any clue. And then I started to ask people on how to get started on crypto, and this was actually not very easy because no one could really give me an answer.
I think it's actually interesting that the first time you got in touch with Bitcoin was not because you were speculating or you were fascinated of the technology, but you actually used it to buy something real. Do you remember how you bought those Bitcoins and how you found your seller at the time? Because I think it was not through an exchange back then, it must have been like peer-to-peer.
I actually Googled for people who sold Bitcoins and then went to someone's apartment and purchased my Bitcoins actually there. I gave him some money and in exchange he made the transaction.
Cool, I think that's interesting that back then, again, this is 6 years ago, but it feels like a lot longer. I feel it's interesting that back then when there weren't even real exchanges, or very few of the ones that are big and popular today.
What was funny about this, that when I was searching for people who sold Bitcoins, it was actually very hard to find someone. In the whole city of Vienna, there were only 2 people who were doing this, and I think right now there will be way more.
Okay, so now we've come a long way since then. 6 years later, we've had 2, you could call it bubbles, or at least like there's been at least 2 periods where people were extremely long or bullish on Bitcoin, and I think especially 2017, due to the fact that price of Bitcoin and Ether rose so much, there was a lot of public attention. In return, drove the price again. There's been a lot of exchanges. Even though it's way easier now to get your hands on Bitcoin and buy all these different currencies, I think it's still very hard to grasp what these currencies can actually do and what the technology is behind them, right? So you've obviously seen me join Dfinity and become excited about decentralized technology and decentralized applications. But even for me, sometimes it's hard to explain very basic concepts. Sometimes I feel like I'm on a very high level talking about concepts, or things are changing very rapidly. So you've decided to take this week off and investigate blockchain more, or research the concepts of blockchain and all the different currencies and some of the challenges that are associated with some of the principles and concepts out there. Before you did this week, I'm sure you've also tried to just more casually pick it up along the way, right? We've talked about this before. You've asked me, how can I learn about blockchain? And we looked at a few different courses and ways of reading and learning about it. What were some of the experiments or ways you've researched the technology before, and to what degree did it work out versus fail?
Well, I started by just asking around anyone that was involved in crypto and blockchain about how to get started, because I thought maybe someone would have a really good tip and some really good sources, but actually it was very hard to find some valuable information because no one could really tell me where to inform myself. And many people would tell me sources and then warn me about many misleading information, but not really tell me how I could distinguish the good and not the good sources. So this was actually quite hard. What I started to do then was just reading through Wikipedia, which was very good. However, the information was not very structured. Not in a sense that I could grasp the whole topic just by reading Wikipedia. I would get a very fragmented view on blockchain, and I felt like many information were missing, and I couldn't connect all the articles together and all the dots together. So this is why I decided to do this Crypto Week, to get more into that and combine all the information.
Yeah, so I've made a similar observation. I think Wikipedia is great to kind of drill down on one term or one concept, but to get started on a completely new area of research, it's sometimes hard because it's not a linear path, right? You start somewhere and then there's like 3 branches and you go in all 3 and there's more tangents from all of these leaves. And so it can be a very cluttered process, or at least not a very straightforward way of getting from zero knowledge to somewhere close to 100% or even 80% of a certain area.
It all depends also on who wrote the article on Wikipedia. There are many authors, they have different writing styles. Some are easier, some are harder to understand. So I would say it's a good source to look up certain keywords or certain elements of blockchain that you don't understand, but for grasping the whole topic, it's actually very, very hard on Wikipedia.
Okay, and so I know you've done a bit of research before this week when you decided you wanted to take a bit of time off from your regular job to invest it into accumulating more knowledge in this area. How did you go about that, and what were the outcomes? What was your learning, and how did you structure your process?
As someone who works in SEO, I of course started Googling around for the best actually courses on blockchain, because I feel like a course is something that's more structured, easier for me. Actually it is to learn a topic than just to read certain articles on different topics. So I found some sources and some nice courses. There are different kinds actually for developers, for people in the financial industry, just for some general information also. And there are so many that I really had to look for the best ones. And I think I found that.
Yeah, we've probably all gone on Google and we've looked for blockchain courses or crypto 101. I know I've talked in a previous vlog episode, I've talked about my favorite podcasts, which was something that helped me get key insights. But I've never gone through a course that takes you from zero knowledge to 100. What's the course that you've chosen to follow? How did you find it, and what was your experience so far?
So actually I found 2 courses that I really liked on Udemy. There was one that it was only a 3-hour course. So there was some general information like what is a miner, what is a token, what's a protocol, and what are coins. And this helped me to kind of get an overview. And then I started another course that was also on Udemy. It's called Blockchain A to Z. And this was actually very nice. It's divided in 3 different parts. The knowledge part always within these 3 parts. And there's a second part where practical aspects come in. And the practical aspects were coding your own blockchain, your own coins, or your own currency, and then creating also your own smart contract. So the first course gave me a good overview, and the second one really gave me some insight on how the technical aspects really are and how everything really works. And I felt like this is something not just for developers, but really anyone who's interested in the topic. And the second part was then, of course, the developing with Python. I'm not that familiar with it. I know some general concepts, but the way it was explained, it was super easy for me to actually create my own little blockchain. And this is amazing because this happened already on the end of my first day of learning about blockchain. So imagine I would go from almost zero or almost nothing to creating my own blockchain in one day. So I would really recommend that course.
Cool. Well, thanks so much. So I think we're going to wrap it up here. What I've heard so far is a bit about how you first used Bitcoin back in 2012 to actually buy something, which is, I think, a lot of people that hold Bitcoin have actually never done. They've never exchanged Bitcoin for something in the real world. And then this week, you've done a bit of research to find courses to go from zero to as close to 100% in blockchain knowledge as possible. And I think the approach that you've taken really resonates with me. One high-level course that's kind of quick to give you kind of establish a landscape, and then a longer course to dive in. And I really like that the course also has a part where you apply what you've learned in theory, because I think very often all that theory, especially if we see the math formulas, feels so abstract and complicated, but when you get to actually implement a small protocol and a blockchain and stuff on top of it, I think it makes stuff a lot more accessible and easily understandable. Thanks so much. I'm sure we're gonna catch up towards the end of the week, and we'll make sure to capture some of your findings as well. And for now, have fun with your courses, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.